on the Daily Drive. Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
I'll welcome Charles Tarbey in a second. He's just been untangling his headphones.
I have, but I've got it done.
Kind
I'm
of
done.
Required for a radio program. Good evening, Charles.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Welcome
I thought
back.
I got away with that.
Not quite. Well, you would have if I didn't broadcast it to everybody listening.
You're just picking on me.
No secrets here.
Rude to you today. That's all that is.
No, you wouldn't. Don't be silly. I'm not that vindictive, Charles. But coming up on the program a little later on, you look like the type of person that might have dabbled with the idea of buying a hobby farm. I know you've got interests in the Kangaroo Valley.
Well, it's a little bit more than a hobby farm. It's a golf course, if you can call it. I guess that's a hobby farm.
To an extent, it would be. I can't imagine you doing much of the greenskeeping work.
I don't, but I'm definitely the one they all look to at the middle of the month when pay comes around.
Yeah.
So, it's a lovely 18-hole championship course, if I can just give it a quick plug. But
what's it called?
Kangaroo Valley Country Club.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I bought it 20 years ago.
Did you?
Yeah, when it was an old rundown place and that Jack Newton designed it, redesigned as an 18-hole championship course, and some lovely little villas around it, and I try to get down as much as I can. I'm the club champion down there. Isn't that unbelievable? The owner and the club champion. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
No one's got the audacity to beat the bloke who writes the checks.
There was a guy that did protest. When I won, and I thought to myself, interesting, somebody, protests against the owner of the golf course. And I know, look, I took it on the chin. I said, I'll take a couple of shots off for a drop out of the water that I made incorrectly, and but he wanted me disqualified. The committee took the 2 shots off, but he wanted me disqualified. But anyway,
wanted to throw the book at you, Charles.
He'll have another chance shortly.
That's the thing about club championships. Yes. Every year there's a new one.
There's a new one, and I've been practicing very hard waiting for him.
So anyway. A golf course is similar to a hobby farm, but certainly not the same. It is a popular lifestyle choice by many. They're sick of living in the urban jungle and they want to smell that country air. So a little later on we're going to chat with Graham McDougall. He's a rural property expert. He's been selling farms and the likes for years, and he's going to give us some pros and cons about what's involved with setting up a hobby farm.
And when we get to Around the Grounds, we're going to be looking at Coolangatta and Charlestown. Now, Coolangatta, we all know where that is. A lot of Aussies would have gone on holiday up in that direction.
That's right.
Just over the border in Queensland. Charlestown, though, in Newcastle in the Hunter.
So the 3 Cs tonight.
Yep.
Because I'm going to help deliver. And
Charlestown and Coolangatta.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And
okay.
Sam, what was your line about Coolangatta?
Well, back when the Gold Coast was being marketed as such, it was the 1950s and people weren't really living there. And so there was an advertising jingle that said, it's hot in Brisbane, but it's Coolangatta. And I'm trying to... We'll find the audio because it's quite a charming old-style 1950s,
was the 1950s,
jingle.
right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the 1950s.
And you were born in the 1990s.
1990s. Don't be silly. No. I was born in the early 1980s, Charles. I'm old hat.
All right.
And, of course, Tom Panos joins us every week to talk about auctions. The weekend rolls around and there's all kinds of moving and shaking in the auction market. Some interesting results this weekend, Charles.
Real good results, actually. Still pretty positive around the traps, although the national clearance rate was 70.5%. This time last year it was 77.8%, so it's certainly not as good as. But still, the interesting one that Sydney recorded 71 neat, Melbourne 72 neat, Brisbane 54 neat, Adelaide 72.9, but here's the winner. I'm sorry, yes, you ready for it? Canberra, 87% clearance rate.
87%.
Go figure.
You predicted that last week, though, didn't you? We've been talking about Canberra going off.
Yeah, we have, and we've been talking about it for a little while, Kayley, and the only problem is that I never take my own advice, and I've been missing out everywhere.
All right, let's get on to housing affordability. Thousands of large homes are occupied by one person in Sydney and in Melbourne. This is an article that came out in the Herald saying that there are more than 2,000 six-bedroom homes across Sydney and Melbourne occupied by just one person, according to Fairfax Media. And so I guess it raises the whole issue of downsizing again. And do we, are we incentivising people enough to downsize? Should we expect them to or not, or should we just leave them be? I mean, they've worked hard for the house. Do they have to downsize at all?
I guess that's true too. That's why you buy a property if you can, or rent a property if you can afford to. The reality is that actually there's a significant number of properties, forget about being underused, that are not even used at all in Australia. And a lot of people buy investment properties from overseas and they don't want anybody in them. They want a new property. They want it to appreciate in value, maybe to sell in the future, or maybe somewhere they're going to live. So there's a significant amount of those, let alone these particular ones. So that it does all add up.
Various state governments are attempting to address that, though. I know Victoria has introduced a vacancy tax, trying to address the problem we've got of investors purchasing particularly apartments and then leaving them vacant.
That's right, yeah.
But in terms of downsizing, there seems to be less of an incentive or an impetus by state governments to come up with meaningful policies to make it easier and cheaper for people of a certain age to get out of a 4 or 5 bedroom family home and into something smaller. Why do you think that is?
That's a very insightful question for somebody such a young age, Kayley, don't you think?
Yeah,
very
definitely.
Insightful question. So what was the question again?
Why aren't...
Look, I think realistically, if you go back to the other about the tax in Victoria, it's, again, people who own properties and buy apartments off the plan, don't want to live in them. The modest tax that the government imposes is just revenue raising. That it's not going to discourage people at all. So I don't think you can tell people what they can do with their property, and I think it'll be an ongoing issue. Downsizing. Look, I live in the same home I bought 34 years ago. And talk about downsizing. The home is way too big for me, but the reality is I've lived there. It's my home. That's where my children grew up, and I really don't want to go anywhere else. And so what do? How do you kick me out?
Well, a lot of problems would, particularly in certain... The areas that they're talking about here are suburbs that are dense with family homes rather than apartments. And when we talk about people that are downsizing, inevitably we're saying move out of your big home and move into a flat.
Yeah.
If they can't stay in their same area where they've had friends for years, possibly family, links to services, community clubs, the bolo, their local golf course, if we can't put them up within their same community, why the hell would they want to move?
Exactly, and that'll always be the problem. Most people, when they're downsizing, that is exactly what they're doing, and they're cashing in. They're moving somewhere completely different. Whether they're taking the punt on going somewhere else because they're going to cash themselves up significantly is the thing. Why downsize and stay in the same area? Because the affordability issues are the same. You're selling and buying in the same marketplace. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
There's also the issue that if you are, say your kids have moved on and you're sitting on a very large house in a reasonably good suburb in Sydney or Melbourne, you may want to pass, your kids to inherit that house. They may need it in the future, and while it's sitting in that really good area, it's going to end up making a lot of money for their kids and their grandkids when they eventually pass it on. So
undoubtedly, look, there are big problems with housing affordability, availability in this country, but I don't think that it should be part of the conversation where we start pointing the finger
Absolutely
at people
not.
I've owned homes for 40 or 50 years and saying they're contributing to the problem.
No, of course not.
I've paid my rates and taxes for all that time, and I've done everything I have to do. I guess I understand what you mean. I'd love to see my daughter bring up her family in my home and the family home. So those sorts of things, you get sort of emotionally attached to them, and it would be really hard for me to move somewhere else. And I think, as you said, people have built up their relationships in an area. How do you get around it? I think, Sam, it's the same old thing. We've never been constructing enough homes. The projection was by the year 2020 we'd be 200,000 homes short of the supply required to fulfil population growth in Australia and so on. And the governments have known this for a very, very long time. And some of them have responded to it. Some of the governments, like the Victorian government or the ACT or South Australia, they responded. They built suburbs. They created the environment. Others just hung on, did very little with it. Now, here's the problem we have in Sydney.
13 12 83, if you're considering downsizing but are encountering hurdles, or if you've been in your house for 40 or 50 years and are thinking about moving but have got problems, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. 13 12 83 is the number.
The other story from the weekend, Charles, was this is an amazing statistic. More than 60% of households in New South Wales have a pet, but fewer than 10% of properties for rent in Greater Sydney are advertised as pet-friendly. Now, that's according to Domain Group listing. A lot of people, this amazing stat here that some people are choosing to live on the street with their pets rather than look for a property that is pet, does not allow pets?
Look, there are properties like there are hotels that are pet friendly and those that aren't. And it's a person's right, the owner of the property, to make that decision. I do believe that, because some people, unfortunately, have abused that situation, and you'll go into some homes where you can really capture the smell, the odour of a pet that's been there. And some people just don't like it. But I actually think that if you can make a home pet friendly, where you might create an environment for a pet, may not necessarily be indoors, which upsets a few people, but at least you make it pet friendly to some degree, and you let it known. See, the problem, Kayley, is that a lot of people don't talk about it. And they go into a property, and then during an inspection, somebody finds that there's been a pet there, and that causes all sorts of problems.
But you don't have to allow a million pets. You could say, it's a pet-friendly property. You're allowed to have a dog and a cat, and that's it. Not 55 cats or something.
Okay, you've been watching The Simpsons. I've seen that episode too.
Karen Davies, she's the Chief Operating Officer at Animal Welfare League, and she says people don't want to give them up, but they don't have a choice. But landlords often think pets can be really, as you said, disruptive and cause problems. But she says, to be honest, most kids cause more destruction than pets.
Now, Sam, this is where you come in. I can't talk about this area.
Who's more likely to draw all over your wall in a Sharpie? Is it going to be Rover, the beautiful Pomeranian that's 7 years old, or is it going to be young Cody who sticks his hand in his crayon box?
Well, who's going to poop on the floor, though?
Well, some of the children don't wear nappies as well, so that could be a problem.
There you go.
There's interesting research coming out of America which shows that certain younger people are putting off having kids until later in age, and they're looking for homes that are smaller as a dwelling size but have larger yards to accommodate their pets. So it's not just a problem we're having in Australia. People are prepared to sacrifice indoor space in return for outdoor space so Fido can run around and not eat the skirting boards.
Well, interesting. Schofields and Kellyville in the city's northwest have the most pet-friendly properties, while this is no surprises here. St Leonard's and the CBD, dominated by apartments, have the least.
Yeah, partly I think that this would be the same in Brisbane and in Melbourne and other major cities. The inner city areas are going to be less pet-friendly, and then out in the new developments, those greenfield property developments and estates that have opened up, the houses are larger on bigger blocks, a bit more free range. You can have pet alpacas out the back in some of those parts, Charles.
Yeah, very, very much good. But, at the end of the day, Sam, I'm not sure how many pets one can have, full stop, given the cost of things.
That's right.
So, have you got any pets yourself?
No, I don't. I live in an apartment. I'm under serious pressure to get a dog. Cat wants a dog more than...
Cat wants a dog.
Yeah, Cat wants a dog.
I think there's enough pets at my home, because that's me.
You're a pet man.
I'm leaving it at that.
You must have owned investment properties, many of them over the years. Do you allow your tenants to have pets?
It depends. And what I mean by that, if they want to have a nice little dog that runs around, I don't have a problem with that. But when it gets a bit beyond that, causes damage to the property and so on, that's an issue.
Because that's not fair wear and tear.
And I'm being very open and honest with you. It is very difficult sometimes to make that decision, because you know that some people need to have pets. Some elderly people need company, and you shouldn't take that away. But again, some people, minorities, have taken advantage. Minorities generally cause the biggest squeakiest wheels.
Yeah, exactly.
13 12 83 is the number. If you own investment properties and you have rules on pets, or if you allow them, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear why you've decided one way or the other to allow pets or ban them. 13 12 83. We'll take a quick break. In a moment, we'll chat with Graham McDougall about whether or not you should buy a hobby farm. Talking lifestyle. Sam Stove, Kayley Harris and Charles Tarbey with you here on the Daily Drive. We're talking property. Shortly, we're going to go around the grounds. We'll go to Coolangatta and also to Charlestown. Kayley, a lot of people daydream about living like a farmer on a beautiful piece of land, but, without the stress of surviving off the agricultural spoils. That's probably a little much to grapple with day to day, and no rain. A hobby farm. That's the answer. Australia has a huge variety of hobby farms, various sizes, shapes, depending on what state you live in. You go, sorry.
Sorry, what's involved in buying one? Is it a good idea? Is it a lot more work than originally thought? And will you look good in an Akubra? These are all very important questions. So let's get some answers. Graham McDougall is the director of McDougall Rural Property in New South Wales. He's been selling farms for years, and he joins us for a chat. G'day, Graham.
G'day, how you going, guys?
Good, thank you. How do you define a hobby farm?
Well, I suppose one person's hobby it's a case-by-case basis. If you're got the wherewithal, you might have a hobby farm that's thousands of acres. But if you're a tree changer type of a person that's heading to the regional areas, you might have a hobby farm that's 20, 40, 50, 100 acres, something like that.
Are they the most common size ones you see, 50, 100 acres, something like that?
Historically, as time's gone on, they've shrunk a bit because of the zoning laws. Well, not the zoning laws, the zoning that local environment plans have put on. So it's harder to find those 100-acre lots because they just don't cut larger properties up into those anymore. But yeah, it's sort of from your 20 acres to 100 acres, I suppose, in our area. So we're in the New England area, which is halfway between Brisbane and Sydney. Can't really speak to, say, Victoria and Queensland, but I'd say it's a pretty similar thing.
So, Graham, Charles here. The price range, cheap to expensive, what are we talking about from your point of view?
Again, it's what you want to make of it. I mean, if your hobby, or if your daughter's hobby happens to be horses, well, then they're going to be expensive. If you are looking for just a bit of respite, I sold a 1,200-acre property between Armidale and Tamworth the other day for about $500,000. But you could have something that's 20 acres near Armidale for over $1 million.
1,200 acres, geez, I would have thought that's more than a hobby.
I think that's serious.
Oh, man.
It's defined as a hobby because it's pretty rugged country. You're really doing a proper enterprise on it. Yeah.
What are people doing with hobby farms? Are they rearing cows? Is it, a couple of chickens? Are they cropping? I mean, what are the kinds of agricultural practices that people are up to?
Well, again, it's a case-by-case thing. Up here on the tablelands, we're more of a grazing thing, so you've got mainly cattle and sheep, be those sheep be lamb or wool. And certainly you've got enough space to be running your alpacas, your chooks, whatever you like to do there. When it comes to cropping, if you're on the Western Plains around Gunnedah or Dubbo or Wagga or something like that, you probably do a bit of cropping.
Do you get many people coming from the cities, Graham, from Brisbane or Sydney to your area and wanting to buy in on rural property? Or is it more likely to be locals?
No, most hobby farm type of things are tree changers. And so they're coming from our area, primarily Sydney, but then, up the Hunter Valley, that sort of thing.
Are they realistic, do you think, about what's involved in running these farms?
Because they're hobbies, it's important if you are considering doing a hobby farm thing, is just to keep your eyes open. Don't make the assumption that you know everything about everything. But I would say, just because you're from the big smoke doesn't necessarily mean you can't make a good part-time farmer. There's plenty of people born in the country who've got no idea about.
Well, Graham, it's Charles again. I'm a country boy. I grew up in Crookwell, New South Wales, and I've got to tell you, cropping sounds all right, but crutching I wouldn't go anywhere near.
I think, Graham, one of the appeals as well, I mean, you see some of these beautiful estates in the country, or maybe, you've got a 500-acre block, something along those lines. You get to build a gigantic house, don't you? I mean, is that an appealing factor, that you can put a very large home on your land?
Yeah, as I say, case by case. Now, if you're in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, around Barrel, that sort of area, yep, go for your life, because the market supports that. You're only a short distance from the capital city, and that sort of money's around. If you were to go to do that in our area, or just say Crookwell, you're going to run into the problem that you might be seen as over-capitalising your property, because, basically the market won't sustain it when you go to turn that around.
I suppose it's hard to turn your hobby farm into an Airbnb place in Crookwell or some of those other parts of New South Wales.
Oh, look, they're around. I mean, people love getting out of the city, and I know there's 4 million people in Sydney, for example, and only if 1 in 10 comes out, that's a lot of people. And we get those visitors all the time.
Can you make money out of these smaller farms, Graham, or is it just a lifestyle choice where you just live there and don't really...
What do you mean, legally?
Yes, legally.
No, look...
Not trying to grow marijuana on there or anything.
Depends on what your passion is, and whatever it is that you do on your hobby farm, I'd suggest that you do your passion. By definition, a hobby isn't something that you're setting out to make money out of. But by the same token, you shouldn't just be pouring money into a bottomless pit. I live on 25 acres. It's a good little block here. it gives my daughter space to run a couple of horses and me a shed to put a couple of motorbikes and run a few little heifers that we trade in. We make money out of it, but it's not going to pay for too much. It's just a bit of fun.
Well, there we go. Graham McDougall from McDougall Rural Property. Thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Graham.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Graham. He's living the dream, isn't he? A couple of horses, a couple of motorbikes and a heifer. Shouldn't talk about his wife like that.
First thing I do is I'd be in a pair of RM Williams faster than I could sign the deed. Then I reckon I'd look like an idiot in an Akubra.
Do you think?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm with Charles. I'm not crutching anything.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm not good with hats. I wore an Akubra to a real estate function in the US, and everybody wanted to talk to me. This is 20 years ago because Australia was, fantastic. And I bumped into a Mexican guy, true story, and at the end of it he said, "Do you mind swapping Akubra a sombrero?" So I said, okay. So I took the sombrero, and next thing I know I was treated so badly for the rest of the time. Because I've got a dark complexion, so all of a sudden I look like a Mexican cleaner. So I go from a real estate agent from Australia wearing Cobra to a cleaner in my sombrero. I couldn't believe the change of attitude just with that one thing.
The danger of swapping hats.
Yes. That Mexican was very smart.
Keep that in mind next time you go to the US.
Coming up after the break, we're going to talk around the grounds, quick local profiles, and we'll be looking at Coolangatta in Queensland and Charlestown in New South Wales.
It was 1953, Kayley and Charles. That was an advertising campaign for...
to get people out of Brisbane and down to Coolangatta, obviously.
And the reason that we're playing that is because we like to go around the grounds on this property. We talk to Century 21's extensive network of real estate agents. Joining us tonight's Peter Swift from Century 21 Coolangatta. Peter, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. How you going?
Very well. Have you heard that song before?
No, I haven't actually.
Peter,
I was born.
We'll have to play that as your song at the next awards function. So all you have to do is turn up for a change.
Wow.
There's a reason to turn up.
He's in trouble. Peter and Sue have been long-standing real estate practitioners in that district, and they know that area so much better than most can ever imagine knowing it. So, Peter, just a quick one. What made you choose to live and sell real estate within that area?
Well, born in the area to start with, Charles. I've grown up here all my life in the building game, and then joined the police force, and then went away and come back, and here I am today.
I wasn't going to tell anybody you used to be a policeman. I was going to leave that one alone.
No, that's okay. I don't mind. I wouldn't be where I was because I wouldn't have earned the ethics that I've got now.
Oh, good man.
Well
good
said.
Man.
So why should people buy in Coolangatta, Peter?
Look, Coolangatta, we've just got a vast mixture of properties. We don't only have the coastline, but because we service both sides of the border, northern New South Wales and Queensland, we've got coastline, we've got riverfronts, waterfronts, canals, we've got units, we've got houses, and then we move into the country areas where, you're only 10, 15 minutes from the beach.
So tell us about those. What are some of the suburbs there in the country areas? Because when you think of Coolangatta, you just think of the beach, don't you?
Exactly, yeah. No, it's just amazing. We've got so many postcodes for such a small area. Like we've got Cobbacai, we've got Balamble, we've got Terranora, you move to Coogin in New South Wales, to Moolumbar, Pottsville. It just opens up a vast areas.
And considering it is such a vast area, does that mean you've got a lot of diversity in the types of dwelling, homes, units, various sizes?
Absolutely, yeah. There's nothing, hardly ever, it's not like suburbia where you can go, well, one house sold for X amount, that's what the next house is going to sell for, because of the city and all of it.
Peter, because of the licensing laws, and you're not far from New South Wales, do you sell real estate in New South Wales as well as in Queensland?
Yeah, we're both licensed New South Wales and Queensland. Totally two different licensing structures. Makes it a little bit harder, but it also makes your brain tick over a bit better. And
your marketplace has been going through a resurgence in the last couple of years. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, look, it has, Charles. Since the GFC, we've come back very strong. We're exceeding prices we did in the 2007, 2010 hypes, which is great for the area.
And I think for the fact that you've got the entertainment you have there with the casino, they were trying to get another one through recently. I don't know how well that's gone. You've got all these magnificent restaurants now. You've got, of course, the Commonwealth Games coming up on the coast, and there's a lot of cleaning up, a lot of infrastructure being built. And in addition to that, you've got an airport just down the road.
Well, international airport now, Charles.
I didn't realise that.
Anywhere. Yeah, you can go anywhere in the world.
Does that mean actually, I've noticed that because I was only recently up there for our conference, and the screening was very, very different when I was going through the security area. So I see what you mean. Now, of course, they have to with the Commonwealth Games, haven't they?
Sure.
Absolutely, and the universities are getting built now to cater for the overseas students. It's just amazing.
What's the median price, Peter?
Median price for what?
For a house.
Riverfront or... look, suburbia. So just like, let's say the normal house, you're looking now in between your 5 to your 7 mark. Depending on what size and where you want to be, because there's different locations in the suburbs.
Of course, there's the big Gold Coast hospital there, isn't there, as well? It's a very good hospital there.
Well, we've got a couple of very good hospitals, not only just that's closer up to the surface end, but, you know, we've got our hospital down in Moolumbar, our country-style hospital, and Tweed Heads itself.
Hospitals.
John Flynn at Tugan.
Universities, everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it sort of turns, Sam, when you think about it, from a holiday destination to a lifestyle, a full lifestyle now, whereas you might have just only gone there on holidays. It's really right up through the hinterland. People are settling in that whole area for life.
Not to mention it's beautiful one day and perfect the next because it's Queensland.
Yes.
You can't look past the sun. Must be nice having that kind of warm weather all year round. Peter Swift from Century 21 Coolangatta, thanks very much for joining us on the show this evening.
And thank you.
Let's head south from Coolangatta to Charlestown near Newcastle. Robert Russell is with Century 21 Charlestown. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, Charles. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, and Sam and Kayley are here as well. Robert, again, what a great area you are in. Hasn't that come of age in the last 10 years, all through Newcastle? Hasn't that just blown out of proportion compared to what it was like?
It most certainly has. It's probably shaken the shackles of past years where we were historically known as, BHP dependent and industry related, but in the last X amount of years, we've sort of grown as an area into other platforms, I guess.
I've been impressed by the development that's gone on in there, the apartment complexes that have gone on. Where do you think that's being fuelled from? I mean, where are the people coming from that buy these properties in Newcastle, Central, Charlestown, all the way through there? Where do they come from?
Well, if I speak for Charlestown specifically just for a moment, look, 75% of our marketplace is owner-occupied. So in saying that, there's still 1 in 4 sales that are investor-made.
Right.
It's a mix. I mean, we do see, and we have been experiencing, increasing numbers of F3 sort of buys coming up the road with $60 in their pocket and either cashing out of that lifestyle and purchasing, I guess, in context of what they've been moving from.
Correct,
what would be regarded as a superior sort of property.
And we do know that people drive to work from your area into the city of Sydney as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, Charlestown's positioned approximately 10 minutes south of the Newcastle CBD area. It's probably regarded as the geographical centre of Newcastle. So Newcastle's long been sort of known for the easy access from one side to the other, probably a 20-minute town in general sense. So, however, it is becoming busier. I think the more the population grows in that area. So, certainly not to the degree of Sydney as such, but it's still quite pleasant to get around. Leisure and recreational attributes are very easily found. Lake Macquarie, Hunter Vineyards, pristine beaches, they're all at your doorstep.
So how far would you be from the nearest beach, Robert?
Well, I live a neighbouring suburb of Charlestown, which is Redhead, and we actually front Redhead Beach. So Dudley Beach, probably the 2 most known south beaches of Newcastle. And, they're quite beautiful.
Who are you seeing buying in the area? Are we talking young families moving in? Are we talking about retirees with the intent on downsizing? Who's buying?
Well, probably like Peter was saying with the Gold Coast there, we experience quite a mix of demographics. I mean, our Charlestown is mostly made up, core being couples with children, young families. But in saying that too, there is a lot of investors that have crept into the market over the previous couple of years, but I think come 1st of July with those legislation changes there, that just saw maybe the pendulum swinging back more in favour, or at least evening itself out to the first home buyers. We may be experiencing a little bit of a change of the guard as well at the same time.
How are you off for universities, schools, shopping centres, those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, look, we do have a very diverse employment sort of base there, and it revolves around health, education and tourism. Newcastle University is very well known, as is John Hutter Hospital, and I guess being that we're outside of Sydney, obviously, we're probably the biggest population base in the remaining state. We do probably have enough of a base there of population to service employment in various areas. So.
And as well, in that region, Robert, there's been an incredible uptick in the quality of restaurants and cafes. There's a coolness that exudes from that area now that might not have been there in the past. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, it's probably come of age. You're definitely right. I mean, in past years there, it's probably been one thing that's been lacking, and whether that's been the foresight of councils just recognising that come with the population base and everything else, the infrastructure that flows with that. And we're an ageing population, so, to bring something with a bit more taste, small boutique-type settings.
Well, there's more of an onslaught, Robert. There's more people coming your way with the freeways being connected down at the start of the freeway and the Pacific Highway being diverted. You're in for a mad time, Newcastle.
We are, and I guess that's testament to maybe larger things like the V8s coming to town.
Right, there you go. Of course, Charlestown is one of the most prestigious suburbs of that district.
There we go. Robert Russell from Century 21 in Charlestown. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Have a nice night.
Thank you.
There we go. That was Around the Grounds. Some great little local area profiles, thanks to Century 21. We're going to talk auctions coming up next. Tom Panos will join us.
Yes, Sam and Kayley with you on a Monday night, and we're talking Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. And, of course, Mondays we also take a look at the weekend's auction results, and there's always a lot going on, plenty to talk about. Let's chat with Tom Panos. He's an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the business. Tom knows what's going on. He joins us again on Property Fast Track. G'day, Tom.
Hi, Kayley. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Starting with Sydney, which had a belter of a weekend, recording the highest clearance rate in 2 months, 73.2, and an increase in listings as well. Are the winter bears waking from hibernation, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's the highest volume, Kayley, in close to 2 months, and that's going to continue to grow now. Like, I'm looking at auction levels scheduled for the 19th and 26th of August, and they are again going up. I did notice the non-collects. The non-collects are the ones that hadn't been collected at the time that they published the auction clearance rate. Suggested that there was more to come in. I actually don't know, but I think by the middle of this week, Kaylee, it's going to be close to 70%, not the 73%. But it's still a healthy rate considering that there was an increase in stock. But I think there's going to be pressure on it coming on over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
It's this time last year, though, Tom, Sydney recorded an auction clearance rate of 82.2%. So for all we can crow about it being a good weekend, there's a lot of room to grow, right?
Yeah, look, I don't know whether the 82s... I think the era of 82s are done and finished. And yes, a 70% compared to an 82 is significantly lower. Having said that, when you look at it mathematically, we're saying that out of every 10 properties, 7 got sold at a price that the owner accepted, which to me is a positive result.
That's correct, Tom. Charles, I was just saying to the guys earlier on that Canberra had a clearance rate of 87%.
Yeah, well, Canberra, I'm having a look here. Canberra, 87%. I had 57 auctions were held this week compared to 70 last week. But, guys, one of the things I'll always say is an auction clearance rate doesn't tell you whether there was 10 people fighting over this property that sold for $400,000 over reserve, or whether there was one buyer that was sitting there and there was a grind that went there for 45 minutes and the owner reluctantly in the end accepted it. So I think auction clearance numbers serve one purpose, but they actually don't tell you what's going on backstage.
It's been a pretty tough time for a lot of agents out there in the marketplace, and I know there's a bit more stock coming on the market. It has been coming on for the last couple of weeks, Tom, but you're absolutely right, and we don't really see that side of it. You don't see how hard an agent has to work nowadays. Before it was a lot easier, and when I say before, it wasn't that long ago. But nowadays, bringing a buyer and seller together is pretty tough work, and sometimes it requires immense skill from an auctioneer, and even more so by real estate practitioners who work around an auction room or an auction floor or an open auction, and they have to bring those two parties together, generally just one person interested in buying. Yeah,
well, Charles, you've got to be a pretty persuasive person at an auction floor now if you're an agent to convince a buyer to tell them, pay an extra $50,000, it's worth it, when for 7 days of the week they've got media and friends and relatives telling them it's banks are getting tighter, there could be a burst in the bubble, hang tight. So there is definitely caution in the market, and there are real estate agents now, Charles, that that sometimes they sell a property, it falls through because there's no finance or the buyer changes their mind. Then they sell the property again. They've actually got to sell the property 2 times and only get paid once. There are instances they got to sell it 3 times. Just imagine going to work, like, if your job is, being working at the radio station or, working as a school teacher and working a full week and then being told, you've got to start again. I think you'll find, though, Tom, that the majority of real estate practitioners that have been around for a little while would prefer that kind of marketplace than the one we've been in. And I say that because there's a lot of education that the industry's been lacking in over the last few years because it's been so vibrant. And many real estate practitioners have fallen over sales. And I think that those that have been in the industry for a while are welcoming the change. I think you're 100%, you're 1,000,000%, Charles, because when the market's good, the market puts the sale together, and vendors can't understand why they should pay a good agent more money when the market's going to do the work. When the market gets hard, these established agents that have got a track record that actually know how to put a deal together are actually valuable, so vendors actually understand why they're hiring that person. So I agree that a hard market is a good market for someone that knows what they're doing.
When you get that question, Tom, that question that, when I want to list my property for sale, who do I go with? Well, the majority of people will call agents with the most number of signs out. And people ask me my advice. I said, you go with the agent that got the most number of sold signs out, not the most number of for sale signs. You see, activity-driven versus performance-based.
That's great advice and great words of wisdom there from Charles Tarbey, the chairman of Century 21 Australasia. We're out of time. Thanks for joining us on the program again this week, Tom.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Charles, for coming and talking some property with us here on the Daily Drive.
I learned a little bit about hobby farms today that I didn't know. So
I'd like to cover off and teach a few things.
I have to go and buy one.
And we learned you could do a good Mexican accent as well.
Thank you. Okay, that was off air.
Charles, we'll see you again next Monday.
Thank you.